Swamiji, thank you for giving us some of your time. I think parents across the world are always searching for a little help and guidance in how best to raise their children, and especially with the little ones who we sometimes find it so hard to understand. Swamiji, our first question, which we've collated from a lot of different parents of toddlers. There are times when we're trying to get the toddler to do something that they don't necessarily want to do. And it's usually at meal times. They'll have a tantrum, they'll throw things around, sometimes they scream, maybe even hit. At that time, they really test your patience, Swamiji. How do we deal with that? And how do we, more importantly, try and maintain an equanimous frame of mind?
Truly enough, that is the most enjoyable time and period of the children's growth and the relationship with the parents. And yes, they can be very testing, especially during meal times. I know I myself I am told. Either they will not eat, or you have to force them to eat, and you have to tempt them to eat. And sometimes it can get messy. Sometimes they are stubborn, and some kids are there who get even a bit aggressive and can hit back, and that, of course, is sometimes disturbing for parents. But a couple of things which I thought over and noticed also, that children, we force them to eat when they are not necessarily hungry, in the name of disciplining them at a certain period of time, and also eating certain food which sometimes parents think is healthy and good for the children. If we can rule out certain factors, one is when children are really not hungry and we are feeding them. And we have to find a very subtle balance between the time of feeding and the time the child is actually hungry. Second is what we feed the children. The very little ones, their body can tell without having likes and dislikes what their body needs and what their body does not need. And therefore sometimes they vomit it out, sometimes they throw it out. There is where parents should be a bit sensitive that maybe the child is either intolerant or is not able to digest that kind of food. And maybe experiment or consult a nutritionist or a doctor and see that we give them the right type of food. This, if we rule out. The second part is that children generally are very distracted in their play, etc. They don't want to be stopped from their play. They become sometimes at that age even stubborn. And in fact, from time immemorial, we have these songs, we have in our epics, we have in our stories of parents and toddlers, trying to force them to eat or cajole them to eat, play with them while you feed them. All this is part of the growing process. But today, when mainly there are parents who are working, they don't have enough time, they have to discipline their timings, and naturally that's the sense of impatience that comes about. There's no help from grandparents at home or any assistance. So even parents feel frustrated, is understandable, but we must understand and be sensitive to the children, because when they're not really hungry, or they really cannot say what they want to eat, or they're beginning to develop their likes and dislikes. It's rather, a matter of anxiousness for parents, and subtly parents do begin to get angry and upset, and that provokes in the children. You might think that the children are provoking it in you, this kind of anger and frustration. But their mischievousness should provoke in you a delight, even more affection. But sometimes your restlessness and anger provokes in the child that sense of stubbornness, a sense of revolt. That also happens in some cases. Each case is definitely different. You have to just be sensitive towards that. And of course, you can control your emotions as much as you can. And as parents, of course, you want to do that. Yes, there are times where children are just being deliberately stubborn, though that's the age with a lot of affection, cajoling. You have to help them into a certain routine, a certain discipline, into certain behavior. But all of that has to be done as affectionately as possible, not with strictness.
Thank you, Swamiji. That was very insightful. So, Swamiji, when our children are at their most hungriest, sometimes they don't even want to eat then, even though it's in their benefit to do so, and we know that it'll improve their mood. How do we maintain a equanimous frame of mind in dealing and helping them eat at such times and deal with their emotions?
Very often, children cannot tell when they are hungry or they are not hungry. So sometimes it's the other way around. They are hungry, and that's why, as you know, when people get hungry, they get hangry. So they are probably even angry, and therefore they throw a bit of a tantrum. And we can see a little bit that between Krishna and Yashoda also, that when Krishna wants to eat and Mother Yashoda feels that she's already fed him and he shouldn't be eating right now, and he goes and breaks pots to eat butter. In all that, I think if we really study our Krishna's childhood stories, I think a lot about the toddlers, their feelings, and the parents' response, and how they should be responding, and how sometimes they react, and then later on realize that they should have done it differently. Probably a lot we can get from there. How to develop this equipoise? Tap into your affectionate part, or your affection towards your child, and a little bit of understanding that they are not at that age to understand much. So be patient. You may be restless, but develop and cultivate patience rather than trying to have equanimity. Have a little bit more patience with them. And I know with these little mischievous ones, restless ones, jumping on sofas while they are eating, riding their tricycles, or touching their dirty hands on furnitures, can be very trying on parents. But as I said, find delight in it rather than getting upset with them.
That's quite interesting. I think a lot of us deal with that on a daily basis. So having that will help us quite a lot. And Swamiji, moving along from that, what's the most powerful ways that we can imbibe spirituality in a toddler? Especially if at that age they're unable to sit still or listen much. How can we make sure that we're imparting that aspect of the culture to them?
That age, children literally, like osmosis, seep it from their surroundings. keep the surroundings in the house or wherever or whichever company you take them with, even conversations in the house, keep them revolving around value-based, devotional, as well as a spiritual culture around them. Do not try to impose or put anything in them. Therefore, if you have an altar, a sacred space, if you have an altar where parents or members of the family just take them even from the time that they are infants and that's the very beauty of having an altar, a puja room in the house, a chapel in the house, where you take even your infants and where there when you do sing your bhajans, you do your aartis, and you do, make offering of flowers, even children who are crawling find great fascination. And because the effect of the ringing of the bell, which are all very, very scientific methods of influencing the mind, maybe you have experienced if you've gone to a spa, whereby merely ringing a bell or a rain stick, they can calm your mind, relax you. So this kind of relaxation, feel-good factor, a sacred space, its vibration, the children naturally seep in. And if you sit there, tell them to fold their hands, they will be restless. Do not bother about it. They will pick up things. They will go and even probably eat the offerings that you have kept there. But as they see you offering flowers, maybe, they will also sit and offer. And somehow they know that they are doing something good. They will even, and we have seen that in even children as young as 8 months or 1 year. And I can give you one example. I was with Pujya Gurudev in Manila, and there they were making offerings and offering their prostrations and doing their puja, and they were offering flowers at Gurudev's feet because Guru has come in. And here there was this toddler, and he was watching all this. And very interesting, he offered at Gurudev's feet, bowed down, and then I was sitting there with them offering the flower, came and offered the flower in my hand. So offered it at Gurudev's feet and offered in my hand. And I remember Gurudev smiling and see how children learn from just observation, that here it has to be offered in the feet and there it has to be offered in the hand, because you are using it in your hand and it was being offered at my feet. I still remember that scene, and you can see how it affects. And when children grow in that atmosphere, as they become older and as they have a better sense of understanding, they are quite used to, they are quite familiar to, and they pick up the subtle vibes, the subtle sounds. They may not understand words of bhajans, but repetitive words like children's rhymes. And I must say that in our Shishu Vihar, which is also there, you can get it on the website of Bal Vihar and Shishu Vihar, we have all the songs, all the methods by which we can give children a spiritual upbringing, a spiritual experience. So please do make use of that, and it is very, very effective, more than even we can think. Now that we have a proper program for toddlers, we can see the progress. We can even see them and hear them learning mantras and chanting them so beautifully. So if we have for them something that is relevant or is capable for them to grasp, they do that very well. At the same time, the general living atmosphere at home, the music that you play, the tone in which you speak to each other, the names of God that comes through your speech, children do pick up all these. So in this manner, the toddlers can get. But there are certain beautiful things like doing the aarti, offering flowers, folding their hands, chanting some mantras, having for them beautiful songs which are like nursery rhymes. All this is very helpful in their growth.
Thank you, Swamiji. I think actually one of the next question might be quite tied to this, and in some ways you've answered it already. But with toddlers, there is so much work in looking after them, feeding them, making sure they're entertained, they're stimulated in the right way. And obviously there are some battles that parents go through with their toddlers during the day. And by the end of it, as a parent, you often feel quite drained and with all energy expended. How does someone summon up the right mindset for prayer, for contemplation, or even when you're going to battle with the toddler for acting in the right way? How does one maintain that attitude?
Prevention is better than cure. But this is where, when grandparents come into the picture, it's really helpful because they love playing with the children. They have time for the children. They have patience with the children. So therefore, it's very important to give them that opportunity to be with grandparents, and which can be very helpful. I know that sometimes that's another avenue of stress for children, to have their parents guiding them, instructing them, as well as maybe in-laws also. But it's a very good period where you should take help from grandparents. And these days, having separated yourselves from them, even grandparents want their independence and say, don't make us babysitters. But it is a very, very helpful thing. That's why when there were families together. Another very important thing is, please don't make your homes into museums that you keep telling your children, don't touch this, don't go there, don't climb here. Earlier, children could just go and play out in the courtyard, which was quite safe, where there were other children, etc. And parents were not so overly obsessed and in a way controlling of their children. But because we are such small units of family today, and without much guidance, parents get so uptight, parents get so worried, overly anxious, and they don't have anybody guide even to calm them. So naturally this agitations come about. But give the children freedom to just grow on their own. Yeah? As I said, keep the house environment safe, that you don't have to keep stopping them at every place. If there's a courtyard outside or a garden outside, under your, in a way, surveillance, let them play. Let them maybe even have gentle falls if it's a safe place, so that you're not constantly uptight. Remember, if they are getting to your nerves, you're getting to their nerves even more by constantly being over them. Now, coming to the fact that all this, as much as you may prevent, yet by the end of the day, with all your, work, and then bringing up the children alone, the emotions that you go through, then even spouse, their differences of opinion on how to do it. But there, one thing is, help each other. One day, one will be upset or overworked or over anxious. The other one should not reprimand them, but rather help them to calm them down. So first of all, as a couple, help each other. Another thing is, like anything in life, before you go to bed, have a short session of sitting quietly and let all your mind thoughts, just let it just flush out. And you just sit there, not reprimanding yourself, not judging yourself, not thinking whether you did right or wrong with your children. That you can do during your introspection time. Let all these thoughts flush out from your mind, and you just remain as a witness watching them. You will find that in about 5 minutes, you've allowed your mind to flush it out. And that is not only for children, it's also for other avenues of your life. And you'll have 1 or 2 minutes of quietude, which is very, very healing. So sit in meditation like this. At the same time, this is the time where, if you can read the stories of the childhood of Krishna particularly, you will in fact laugh, also identify, also sympathize, and also learn to recognize that most parents go through this, and yet they will be the most memorable times of parent-child relationship. And with that, go through some of the tiredness, even frustrations of that time. But don't sit there condemning yourself, because that is where a lot of guilt comes in, a lot of agitation comes in, which leads you to frustration, and which may come out on your spouse, or may come out on your children, or sometimes even on your health.
Even at the end of the day, Swamiji, we are tired, and when it comes to devoting some time to spiritual practice, all I want to do is fall asleep. And I feel that often my spiritual practice is suffering because of that. So how do I deal with that?
See, spiritual practice doesn't have to be very long. As I said earlier also, just about 5 minutes. And even in that process, if sleep is coming, you're not going to just immediately fall asleep. Just 5 minutes, sit in quietude and let all the thoughts pass by, and you just remain as a witness. Where there is sleep involved, also, it's nice to just say a prayer or just chant a bhajan, a hymn, just to calm yourself down, or even listen to some bhajan or a hymn that you can calm yourself down with. And if you're not too tired, as I mentioned, do some reading, but reading of some things that will calm you down.
Thank you, Swamiji. I think that's really interesting, because more often than not, we are looking to feel content and at peace by the time it's time to go to sleep. So I think those tips will really help. One other question, Swamiji, an extension of that. How do we deal with the mixed emotions that come into play? Sometimes it's the feeling of guilt, of letting others look after our children, or relying on others to look after our children. How do we deal with those different emotions?
See, here I see 2 forms of guilt. One is guilt that you're not necessarily giving time, or you have enough time for the children, or you're doing the right thing. And the second is seeking help, or taking help from, say, parents, grandparents, etc. See, first and foremost is, do not be too hard upon yourself. You know, as parents, you love your children, you care for them, but in fact, you get over anxious. And therefore, feel that you're not a good parent. And this, in all ages parenting, I have spoken in greater and greater details. But when they are toddlers, you have to give them, and always remember, these days when you have got small unit families, you cannot give quantity time. But for toddlers, you do have to give a certain amount of time for them, being in their presence, because they don't understand the difference between quality and quantity. As they grow up, it's the quality time you give them rather than the quantity time that you give them. But as far as toddlers are concerned, you may have to take out some special time during the day, or especially if you're working parents or a working parent, be home at a certain time, or especially during weekends, to be with the children, spend time with them. That will be practically in every age. So don't be too hard on yourself, unless you're being lazy or you're just being upset and you're just being utterly selfish, which also sometimes comes up. You want your own time, and that's not unfair or something that you have to be guilty about. But if you, and which most of the time you do enjoy being with your children, etc. But there are times there is office work, your mind is too occupied, and you just want some quiet time with yourself. So do find in the house your quiet space. But do not sit and be harsh and hard upon yourself until and unless you know that deliberately or out of laziness or distraction that you have, neglected your children. Correct yourself. Learn to even forgive yourself. And as long as you've not harmed the child in any way, don't be too hard upon yourself. But know that this is the age, Panchavarshani Lalayet. This is the age where you're building your bond of affection, trust, security in the child. The child needs to feel that you are there for them. Now, because of your work schedule, sometimes you may not be there when they fall or they bruise themselves and the child is crying. But at that age, the children have their own sense of understanding. They don't blame the parents. So don't feel too guilty about it. At the same time, if you're not unnecessarily using the time of your parents and others, but you do want some time together as a couple, you might have some, office or work-oriented, even a party that you might have to go. Sometimes you want a little time for your entertainment. In fact, every parent wants that. Your parents did it, our parents did it, right? But they kept us in the care of loving people whom we probably had a good break and enjoyed even more, such as grandparents. And if they are happy to have your children, and very often they are, and you're not imposing on their free time or the time that they want, you shouldn't be feeling guilty. Please do give them that break. You take that break.
That's really reassuring, Swamiji. Very reassuring to a lot of us. And so, Swamiji, technology is also a big part of our lives nowadays. And in this world, there is a concern that a lot of parents have about how much screen time is okay. Some parents don't give their kids any gadgets at all. Some use it strictly for educational purposes. What's the guiding principle here that parents can use in dealing with screen time?
I would suggest here, there is a lot of research being done of the effect on the mind, the growth, the neurological growth of children due to these gadgets. And we know that even adults are affected by it, but especially in the formative, very early years of life, we should find out and know that up to a certain period. Of course, they see their parents, they are able to touch, phones are lying around, tablets are lying around, TV is constantly there. So you can't completely avoid it. And these gadgets not only have a fascination to the adult mind, and especially youth mind, teenage mind, but it is absolutely attractive for the little children because of the light, the flashes, the color, and they take to it so easy because it prompts them in their own subtle way to use and operate them, which children very often can very easily learn to do it, and naturally it's the sense of discovery. All this comes about in the child. So we can't completely avoid it, but especially in the very early ages, just for a pacifier, please at least there avoid giving children these gadgets just to keep them quiet or from crying or to go and do your work and keep them occupied. That can be avoided. And as much as we can avoid in the early days, especially up till 1 or 2 years, where they're not exposed to the radiation, to the light, or even just the use of that gadget, and they can feel various different textures. This in our Shishu Vihar, some of our Swaminis, Sevaks have done a little bit of research and used this for them to develop their systems. So in the very early days, I would say avoid as much as possible. But by the time they are about 3, 4, if you can train them in a certain manner to use it only for certain times and for certain things. Do not expose or leave open too many things that can fascinate them. Just simple things, and even things like, say, for example, music, but without images, that they can just play and they can entertain themselves. Of course, there are many other factors here, but yes, in the early days, avoid, then be minimalistic, and later on, train them to be moderate.
Thank you, Swamiji. I know there's always a temptation for parents to try and placate a child with a phone, even though we know it's probably not in their best interest in the long term. And so, actually having what you've said help us in striking that balance and making sure that we're using technology in the right way, especially because it is part of our lives, rather than cutting out completely, which would be very challenging. A question that I know has come up: how do we teach our children to be kind, but without being a doormat? How do we teach them to be confident and assertive without being proud? How do we get that balance for them?
At this age, do not try to teach them assertive. They are very assertive. It's called minority rule. You teach them to be kind, sensitive, like don't just go and crush an ant or an insect. Don't bang doors. Show them gentle ways. Make them kind, make them compassionate, because kindness and compassion gives you strength. It is not your weakness. But as they grow into the next stage, and the questions that will come up at that age, and we have, in the series spoken about it, that there's a big difference in our understanding of kindness, compassion, goodness, and we think that will make them weak, but rather we must understand that they are ornaments of those who are strong. So I have spoken of this in the next session that is coming from the age of 5 to 10 more elaborately, and I'm sure you can listen to that in the next series. But please teach them kindness, teach them compassion without fear that it will make them weak.
So, Swamiji, when we have more than one child, how do we treat each one equally and fairly? If they have very different personalities and react differently to praise and discipline, ultimately we want to show them that love equally. But how do we ensure that we're doing that?
See, if their age is not too far apart, like it's 1.5 year, 2 years, bringing up children which is not very far apart, in fact, is easier, and that we see from our, past experiences when we were ourselves growing up and what we heard our parents. So, but if there is a gap of 3 to 4 or even 5 years, they are at different stages of their growth. You must, in one way, take their growth independently. Because, in the sense, there will be things that they will do jointly, I do understand, and they're in the same house, same parents, same time. But it's not your tone of voice, etc. It is your behavior, your attitude towards them at that age that we have spoken about, that if you keep that attitude towards them, it is good for them. What we have to be very careful is that children instinctively, and especially when families where these feelings have been there, somehow the other children instinctively do have a bit of sibling rivalry and sometimes jealousy. That you must be a little watchful about. But sibling quarrels will be there. Have you seen animals like dogs or cats? They're actually playing and it looks like they are fighting with each other. Don't get worried about them. Allow them to express themselves only when they get a bit aggressive or verbally harsh, that parents should come and separate them. Generally, the older one gets the brunt of it because we expect the older one to be more mature and of the age where can understand and should be behaving better. And there is where sometimes parents feel guilty and children also develop that, you love this little one more than me. So there you have to just be sensitive. Each family is different, each child is different, each parent's temperament and behavior with their children is different. But these are few sensitive areas where we have to understand. Also, a toddler requires more care and attention, and as the child grows, say to be 6 or 7, wants his or her independence, and you should be giving them also. At the same time, when the child wants affection and sees that the younger one is probably getting that attention, that's when they become attention seeking, and that's one of the problems that you would be feeling. But you must be sensitive to them also. And when the toddler can bear and not feel so sensitive that you suddenly turn your attention to the older one, not because he or she is throwing a tantrum, but because you know that the person or that child requires at this moment your attention. So you have to balance it out, and balancing is a very subtle act. Also, that can be divided between the two parents at the time that one looks after, say, the toddler, the other looks after the little older one. But as they play together, they learn their own dynamics, they build their own relationships, and all said and done, even competitive siblings do have a certain bond of protection for each other. And especially when the older one is made to feel that sense of love, affection, more than a sense of responsibility at first, if they're still under the age of 3. But as they grow to be 4 and 5, where they're not burdened with responsibility, but they are given this opportunity to be a bit responsible for the younger one's emotions, even their desires, And if they have been brought up with that affection, at first they are seeking that affection, which as they are growing up, they seem to lose it to the younger sibling. But as they realize that they are growing older, parents can very gently push them to their next, or guide them to their next stage, where they feel a sense of responsibility for their younger siblings and find joy in sharing them. And that's a time when you can start talking to them, assuring them that you love them, and the younger ones need your, affection and support. But now you are a grown-up boy, and don't you like to do something more independently? Or you're a grown-up girl, don't you want to do something on your own? Like that, you kind of guide them. I'm just giving one simple example, but yes, slowly you balance this. But you can share it between the two of you. As I said, when there were larger families, this would be shared. The older ones would be then taken care by the older aunts, uncles, cousins. You do need in parenting a community around you. And in certain places where it's not the family that makes the community, neighbors and all, I've heard that they become very helpful during such times where sometimes it becomes a bit challenging. So do take help where it is required.
Actually, Swamiji, that leads us on to our next question quite nicely. What benefits a toddler more? Is it being with their parents as they carry out their chores and maybe their attention isn't there for the little one, or is it being in a proper childcare setting where we know that they're being stimulated and they have their peers around them?
You'll have to have a balance of both. Don't just send them to a childcare center because you don't have time for them. There's some quality time that they have to spend with the parents, with the family. And because, again, really speaking, the community was a childcare center. The children used to play with family, cousins, etc., or with the village children or the community children. So you didn't really require daycare centers at such an early age. But the requirement has come because both parents are working, they don't have so much time for the children, even domestic help may not be available. So it is good. And I think in modern society, even daycare centers are not too long. They have their certain timings where you can leave your children, but certain timings you have to take out from your work career where it is possible, either of the parents, to give some time with the children. And even if you are doing household chores, right? Children can always, of course, in safe areas, but it's more important while they are playing, they know that the parent is there at home and they can go to them when they need anything, they want anything, or even now and then get their attention and they come and hug them, or even come and play with them, or make a conversation with them in between. When they want it, they will come seeking it, as you know. So, yeah, you need a balance of both, especially these days. I would not say that never keep them in daycare centers because it may not be practical for where especially there's only a couple dealing with their children and or handling their children or looking after their children, or you have sometimes even single parent homes. So yeah, daycare centers will be required, and children grow in both, being with their peers, being with their family members, being with their parents. And all the time only with the parents also sometimes brings a lot of attachment and dependence, and the children begin to cling, and then it is very difficult to wean them off. So a good balance. And I think in nowadays daycare centers, they do have only certain hours and they insist that only this much hours should be there in the daycare center. Know a little bit more about it and then handle it accordingly.
Thank you, Swamiji. And Swamiji, I think this brings us to our final question. A lot of what we've discussed is about parents wanting to raise their children in the best possible way, and this world is always seemingly teetering on the edge of one crisis or another. It's a time of climate change and coronavirus crises, and increasing roles in social media. How do we raise our children, especially our little ones at this age, to be able to be strong enough, secure enough, and happy enough to face such challenges?
If you are bringing up well, it's the law of nature. These children adapt much better than we adapt at this age, when there is a sudden change or complete trend change or sudden climatic change. These children, you just bring them up in the best manner. They come with an inbuilt aptitude for that time period in which they are born. There's a higher law at work. But what we can do for them is that we make the world a better place for them as much as we can, rather than making it a worse place. And as they grow up today in the education system also, and especially in the house environment, if you can teach them to consume only that much which is necessary, to waste hardly anything, not being paranoid about it, but in the upbringing, and that's how we were brought up, never to waste. Take only that much food in your plate that you can eat, and if you want more, take a little bit more, but do not waste food at all. Even food, do not waste anything. So when this kind of upbringing is given to them, they have already developed this inner sense of responsibility as well as self-mastery and a vision in their life, or even a behavioral pattern of not wasting, over-consuming, being greedy, and being destructive to the environment. Otherwise, as you can see even now, during the pandemic, there were possibilities of financial crisis, ill health, even fatality. All this was there. But we've all managed it very well, I should say. So we have been given this inner strength of adaptability. Yes, there are others who might be comparatively not so strong, and anxieties and all hit them. But if you make them responsible, and that too also not someone who is fanatic about certain things, but they are given a culture to be responsible for their environment, and we are not too overly clinging, protective about them, but they experiences the challenges of climatic changes. Even at home, if the electricity is gone, the heater or the cooler, that they should learn to bear with these things. When you take them on picnics and adventure trips, don't take them always into 5-star hotels and keep them in air conditions watching only television. Take them outdoors, let them adventure, let them feel the ground, let them be, fall a little bit, not drop them obviously, but don't make everything into a crisis. Children will get hurt, they will fall, but that makes them strong as they go on. They will have also situations in school where sometimes there are aggressive children. All this, you guide them through facing it better. And as you do that, when they become people strong, then some uncertainties of life that do come about, they will be able to cope with it as we have been able to cope with it.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you so much. I think so many parents will find everything that you've told us quite reassuring, and I think we'll take a lot of comfort from it. That we're not doing so badly, and that as long as we keep giving our best to our children, that we're doing the right thing. So, Swamiji, thank you so much for all your time and knowledge that you've shared with us.
Hari Om, and enjoy the best period. And every stage is beautiful in parenting and growth of the child. But enjoy this most beautiful stage of the children growth. Hari Om.
Shishu kids sit very still, sitting down together. I say Om and you say Om as we all chant our prayers. And when we're through, we'll feel anew to practice all our jnana, to know the Lord our very God through all our acts and done.